I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the June meeting of the
Yes, it is.
Edison Northwest School District Board. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Can I have one at a time?
Well, we tried.
Who?
George moved, Mark seconded.
Thank you.
So we have actually a couple changes. We can remove the second executive session. So we will just have one executive. Presentations to the board. We'd like to switch the order. So food service goes first, school climate second. And we need to add one. Uh-oh. Elizabeth, do you have I'm not on the Wi-Fi actually.
The action item?
We need to add one action item.
Do you want me to read it?
Do you mind reading it?
For the board to approve the Addison Northwest School District resolution for the Ferrisburg Capital Improvement refunding note borrowing renewal in the amount of $17,858 plus interest to be paid in full by the close of FY19.
So we can make that action item G?
Yep.
Yep. Any other changes to the agenda? All right. So all in favor of adopting the agenda with those amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Brings us to public comment. We do have some folks here from the legislature. Is there anyone else that wanted to make any public comment tonight before we move into that? Okay, so it's all yours.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you to the board. So my name is Chris Brake. I'm one of your two county senators. My colleague Claire Air is right here, front row, and there are other representatives. So Diane Lamper, you know, is here. And there are people who are interested in coming to the legislature also here. So Ruth Hardy, who's a Senate candidate, and Matt Barong right behind me. So anyway, there are a lot of people with from the legislative side of things. As you know, we're in a special session. We've already had a veto of a budget, and the nub of the argument is over education, finance, and budgeting. And since it's very unusual for us to be in a special session, and you already had a meeting, I reached out to Sue, and she said it'd be fine to come in and talk with you all. So from my point of view, really there's a couple things that I'm hoping we could do briefly during your public comment section, and that is the pro tem, Senator Tim Ash, has agreed to come down from Burlington to join us, and I'm happy that he did. So the two things were that, one, to just give you an update on what's going on, because if you're reading the press to keep up with it, it's confusing, I'd say, to follow. And so from the group of us who are in the trenches, I thought it'd be helpful for us to come here and report out a little bit. And then the other thing is, since we also represent the interests of this board and other boards around the state, we're really interested in hearing from you on if you have thoughts about this budget, whatever crisis you might call it, that's underway right now. And also, you know, sort of the main things you're hoping we will keep in mind as we go back to work, because the special session has not concluded yet. The other thing I just wanted to say in terms of Senator Ash, so he was chair of the Finance Committee, and there's the tax side of thing lives with finance, so he's particularly well informed on the tax side. It's also an appropriations matter. He serves on appropriations, and then as pro tem of the Senate, he's leading, representing the Senate in the negotiations with the governor. So I appreciate him making himself available to come down and join us. And I think with that framing of our brief visit, I'd like to turn it over to Senator Ash.
Great. Well, hello, everybody. Having served on a municipal board myself, I know what it's like to be in meetings on a sunny day at 6 o'clock. Spent most of my life in Contois Auditorium for about 5 years. Felt like 8. So as Chris mentioned, we're in a special session. For those of you who don't really know what that means, this is only the second time in modern history, really, that there's been a special session of Vermont government. it really, Chris said it boils down to education finance, which is largely true, but it's also education spending. The two sides of the education coin are both in play. And just to put things in a quick context, when we left the legislative session, what we thought was the end of the legislative session in May, we had passed a budget that was unanimously voted on in the Senate and nearly unanimously voted on in the House. We had passed a tax bill which included the education tax rates for residential and non-residential that was voted for in the Senate by our most liberal members and our most fiscally conservative members. The House had overwhelming votes in favor as well. So when we left in May, we all thought, wow, this is what people really expect of us. Everyone came together, tripartisan votes in massive numbers for these bills, but the governor vetoed them, and without sounding partisan, he had made pledges ahead of time that he would not allow the education tax rates to go up, the base education tax rates. And so the legislature's position has been the following, that if you don't let the education funding system pay for the budgets that the voters have approved, you're asking for trouble. And so this year, one of the reasons that many school boards did really hard work, came in at an average growth rate of 1.5%, and then had to turn around and tell the voters that the taxes were going up well beyond what 1.5% would have justified, was that last year when the governor made the same anti-tax rate pledge, we had to use some one-time money to get through the stalemate that we were in. And anytime you use one-time money for ongoing expenses, the next year you find that hole is there, and if the one-time money's not there, then you've got trouble. So this year, the governor has suggested using about $55 million of one-time money. The legislature said, but wait a sec. It is an election year. We are politicians. We get the idea of giving people kind of what they want. But that will mean a 6-cent increase next year before we even talk about any additional spending that happens in our school budgets. And this is where things transition to education spending. So what the administration says is, well, it won't be one-time money because we're going to propose all these education spending changes, which will mean that we won't have those expenses in the future, and I'll just briefly touch on them. First is what's described as increasing the student-to-staff ratios. The proposal would raise $262 million over 5 years, the administration's proposal, which could only be achieved with mandatory ratios. From a voluntary point of view, it's impossible to just book that kind of money. It's too big. It's 1,000+ positions across the state. The second, and Chris is on the Education Committee, is booking $86 million over 5 years in reduced special education expenses. You all may know that we've passed a change moving forward on how special education is paid for by the state, but none of the experts who worked with us on the proposals themselves believe those savings will be in the first 3 or 4 years. They're really 5, 6, 7 years and beyond that there'll be ongoing savings. So $86 million, though, has been booked by the governor's proposal. The governor's proposal books $62 million in reduced healthcare expenses for teachers, and then another $35 million over 5 years by reducing the per pupil spending levels that would start getting hit with the excess spending penalty. So right now it's at 121% of the statewide average. It would drop to 111% very quickly. And each of these has a whole variety of things that have been critiqued by our nonpartisan analysts and found that there would be major problems achieving this. But our big concern, and the reason why we've really stood firm on the sound financing model of letting the system pay for itself and not using one-time money, is that when these savings don't materialize as the governor's plan would have, it means that 1, we'll have the pressure for tax rate increases, and then 2, it will accelerate more proposals to do more dramatic cuts in our public education system. So it starts creating a cycle of perceived fiscal crisis in our schools. And if all of you and your peers around the state last year had spent 10% more on your school budgets, we might be saying, you know what, we do have a problem here. We gotta have a talk about this. But the statewide average was 1.5%. So school boards have largely embraced the challenge and tried to find savings in personnel, savings in operating expenses. Act 46, which has been tremendously difficult in different pockets of the state. People have come together to try and better manage their affairs. And all of these proposals, we have found, would immediately interject Montpelier into the work that boards have been doing. And so where we're at now, and then I'll just conclude, was we passed a budget, a second budget, which tried to remove the few things we're fighting about with the governor, which is this one-time money issue. We said, look, we'll move in your direction and keep the residential tax rate flat from last year, and then reserve the question of what to do with the remaining taxes on non-residential for a second thing. But let's not hold up the entire state budget over what is effectively a $35 million dispute between the governor and the legislature. And we hope very fervently the governor signs this one, because the idea of a government shutdown, from my point of view as someone in the Senate, would be hugely embarrassing. It would have financial consequences. We're not sure what's going to happen, but in the next few days we'll find out if that gets vetoed. If that gets vetoed, we have real trouble, because it means that the budget, we will have been normalizing a process of holding up the entire state budget in order to force through some of these aggressive education policies that I don't think are very popular with the public, but that's probably more your expertise than mine, so I'll leave it there.
So what can we do? What are you looking for from us? Do you want to know where we stand on some of these things?
Well, I think what would be helpful, I'm not sure the extent to which, as you followed the news in Montpelier, you have had moments where you said, God, I wish they knew what we were doing here and would either do this instead of what they're talking about, or stay out of this because they're going to mess it up for us. Those would be two important bits of feedback we would get as we return with our peers and continue to talk with the administration. So,
If I may.
Sure.
Senator, one of the points of contention is the fact that you folks want to put all of that excess one-time money into the pension fund. And that obviously is a real problem that's been developing over a period of years. Can you enlighten us as to what the deficit is in that fund?
well, so for those of you who are less familiar with the buildup of this problem, in the 90s, mid to late 90s, when the stock market was going gangbusters, there were some who said to the legislature and then Governor Dean, we don't need to pay our annual amounts into the pension system because the stock market's going to take care of all our problems. And probably for a few years it felt great, and it looked like that was the case. But they dramatically underfunded the system. Fast forward a decade, in the mid-2000s, stock market's going great again. Now we have Governor Douglas, same message is delivered to the legislature. So tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars of underpayment into the system has created a hundreds of millions of dollar problem. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head. The contribution the legislature was talking about making in our budget was $35 million, and it would save over a 20-year period $100 million of compounded interest and other expenses. So we are under no illusion that it makes the challenge of a fully funded or appropriately funded pension system. It doesn't solve that problem, but it makes a good faith step in the direction.
And I understand that the retired teacher's health comes out of that same pension fund, but there's no provision for putting money in to cover that.
Maybe we can talk offline about that one.
Sure.
But they're both growing challenges, there's no question, and the nature of them being retirees who are being paid for through the state budget process means that the expenses are growing too.
Yep.
I mean, one other quick thing on that, in terms of having done the analysis on the investing of $35 million that saves $100 million over time. I mean, it reminds me of something as simple as making an extra mortgage payment. So yes, you have a long-term debt, but by making the extra payment, you save a great deal of money in the long run. So it's fiscal prudence, and it is well vetted, and so we know that's the kind of savings we can count on if we take that step. The alternative of buying down the rate is a one and done savings, and there's no sort of compounding over time. The notion that the administration presented was that they would be taking a loan and treat this buy down of the rate at this point as a loan, and that these savings that Senator Ash walked through in the different, like, mandatory ratios, et cetera, would be the way to repay the loan. But, you know, going back to the loan paradigm, you would go to the bank and prove the creditworthiness of the proposals first, not just say, trust me, this will work out. You would want to make sure you had the income, the cash flow to support that loan. And right now, we, based on past experience and the data we've seen so far in the last month, I don't think we have much reassurance that it will be able to repay that loan.
I think the ratios is a real hot button issue from this perspective. You know, there are a lot of factors that go into there. It's not as simple as just saying 5 students for every adult. You know, we've made some strategic changes here to actually bring more folks in-house at a cost savings and better service for our kids. But now, you know, if something like these ratios were to go in, that would be a ding against us.
And it's worth noting that every single one of the proposals on the policy front that the administration has presented only affect the public schools.
Right, exactly.
Only the public schools. And so for all the parts of the state where a great number of dollars are tuitioned to independent or private schools, and this is not to pick on them, but these mandatory ratios wouldn't apply to them. Healthcare savings wouldn't apply to them.
Right.
The special ed savings obviously don't apply to them because many of them don't accept students
Right.
who have special needs. And then the excess spending penalties wouldn't affect them either. So what it does in those districts that have both, let's say you operate a K-8 system and then you tuition for high school, what it means is that when you're given these types of mandates, you have to find all your savings through the K-8 system, in that instance I gave, and then you keep paying the retail price for the high school, whichever high school you send your kids to. So it further squeezes the pressure. As they get to grow their billing to the local district, it puts more pressure on the public schools, and that's kind of, it's a politically tense discussion in many parts of the state, but it's a quiet but growing line item in the state budget is tuition dollars to independent and private schools, while we ask a great deal out of our public schools.
And I mean, I think squishing, I mean, our special ed director would have a lot more insight here, but squishing the special ed funding is ludicrous in my mind because it's a mandatory service. I mean, we don't have any option. We have to meet the needs of the kids who come through our doors. So, you know.
Additionally, there is serious economic pressure on all of our families now. And that's squeezing down to our kids, which is requiring these services at a much higher rate than we have 10 years ago.
Well, and this is another thing, this is really not so much for the special session, but something that your district staff hopefully can help us as we look ahead to next year, for those of us who'll be in the legislature. I was recently in a room with 10 superintendents, and I said, I bet you that the actual money you spend on educating kids, classic instruction, has been going down. Whereas the money to meet all of the social needs and mental health needs and all the issues with families and challenges is what's really eating everything up and growing. All 10 of them sat there with their heads nodding. But that also is something that political leadership has looked at school boards and said, why can't you keep your spending down? And the sad fact is you are keeping the education spending down, unfortunately, because you've got this fast-growing social spending that's happening in the schools. And you're doing it because that's the only way you can educate the kids. But really, those are responsibilities that used to rely with either social service agencies or the state of Vermont, not with the local school district. So if you can quantify how that's occurring in your schools, that would be a great help to us as we try to relieve pressure on property tax-funded education.
Okay. George, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess a procedural question. If you passed a second budget now, if the governor does veto it, I mean, do you have the votes to override the veto, or how does this work?
Well, this is
Sounded like you had the votes the first time around.
the Senate and the House are in slightly different situations. This is more, this is not meant to be a political statement, again, just a numbers reality. The Senate would stand behind this budget and override the governor's veto. The House has different membership, partisan composition, and we've seen some House members who voted for the budget the first time who said they would vote not to override it. So their position is different when the governor wants them to help. So that's as far as I'll go with that political statement. So it might be hard to override a governor's veto in the House. And so that's a reality we face. We know we have to get to the finish line because a government shutdown is just not acceptable. So it's the worst part of politics.
Anyone else? Diana?
I think it's really disheartening as a school board. We came in with a level funded budget. We've had to lay teachers off. We've had to reduce positions in our principals. And we did what was asked of us, and we were told that there would still be a rise in the state property tax. So we told that to our voters, and they still passed our budget by a very large margin. So getting this message from the governor that we didn't do well enough, or whatever's happening in Montpelier, is really like, I don't really know what our job is anymore.
Well, that's a perfect maybe way to conclude is, the question is, should you have a job?
Yeah.
Should you?
Yes.
No, this is a very real question.
I understand.
For those of you who read Nicole Mace, who's the director of your association, she finishes her op-ed with the question, it says, if the governor would like Montpelier to take over running the schools, that should be the proposal, but not mask it with this series of kind of creepy crawly proposals. And so, from our point of view, we've recognized that coming in at 1.5% with all the challenges you face means you've made some very hard decisions. And that's been happening all over the state when we hear from school boards all over the place. So then to say, well, you were given a target of 2.5%. You came in at 1.5%, but now that number isn't good enough, and we're going to make you go to 0%, only to set you up to fail next year.
Right.
That's the trouble. So we have been trying to preserve the integrity, and we know we're as guilty as everyone. From time to time, we have been culprits in messing with the work that school boards do. We're not purists in that sense, and so for that, I guess we apologize retroactively. However, we have spent the last 2 years trying to preserve the integrity of our school board system and the integrity of local school budget votes on town meeting day. And if you can't kind of have it both ways. You either respect that process, respect the local voters, respect your work, or you just purposefully move to a state takeover of education. And right now, the proposals that we're fighting with are really state takeover proposals. And so we want to get out of Dodge with a healthy public school system that's celebrated, not maligned. We want to respect the work you guys do, and we need to know that we've got to find some resolution with the governor. And so if you do have the ability to communicate with the governor, you obviously have your own individual positions as well as a board position, but I just hope you'll communicate what the impact of some of these proposals would be here, because the governor himself campaigned against using one-time money to pay for ongoing expenses. This loan concept that Chris mentioned is their way of sort of doing a little bit of a maneuver to say that they're not using one-time money because it's all going to be magically covered by these proposals, which haven't found much popularity in the public. So if you were able to look at the proposals themselves and explain what that would really mean to you. You know, you just took on additional staff, which might have even saved money, but now you'd have to let people go. It just creates this constant sense of crisis. And I guess that's my concluding remark, is that I believe we have great public schools in Vermont. I also believe that there is a slow effort to undermine people's confidence in those public schools. And that's why we're so determined to get out of this with a resolution that doesn't further undermine the work you guys do.
Right. And also the work of the voters. I think our voters know what they're voting for when they go to the polls, and it seems like that's being diminished as well. Like, well, they didn't really know that they were
The governor
voting.
said something in 3 weeks ago that I wrote down because I still find myself astounded by it. There was a press conference about the back and forth between the legislative branch and the executive branch. How is this going to be sorted out? And the reporter pointed out that there are two equal branches of government, and the governor's response was, quote, "The governor gets to decide what's best for Vermonters." And, you know, the shocking thing to me is that citizens around the state elect 180 people to travel to Montpelier to represent them. That's a relatively, sort of intimate level of representation at state government. State reps represent 4,000 people. I mean, senators only 20,000 each on average. So, and then school boards are, thousands more people who are representing their communities. And to hear that our one person's going to decide on behalf of everyone, it's a very different dynamic. It doesn't feel respectful and productive, and I always feel like we always do our best work when we listen carefully to each other, and that's part of why we're here tonight. We want to hear what's on your mind and take that back with us to Montpelier.
Can I just say one thing about ratios? I would be very interested, depending on what he's come up with, the calculation of ratios, where they came from, and are they requiring personalized learning in those states? Y'all, in your infinite wisdom, put Act 77 down on us, and then you made us cut, right? I mean, that's a really, really big point. How do you do personalized learning and cut your teachers?
Right.
So one of the things that's been disorienting is that the proposals have almost no detail. Our nonpartisan staff, it's called the Joint Fiscal Office. They serve all the different parties, and they have really gone without criticism for decades because they really are just the facts kind of people. And they pointed out that all these proposals either were too light on detail to even judge whether the numbers are realistic, or the numbers didn't add up. The ratio example, the only real detail we've been able to get is that they don't include certain special education professionals, licensed special ed teachers, and some contracted service like presumably bus drivers, or if you have contracted meal service or something like that. But other than that, we have no idea what it's based on. And so when the Joint Fiscal Office, our nonpartisan crew, said none of this makes any sense, the governor's chief of staff attacked them for being partisan. And they said, no, we're just doing what we're supposed to do. And so we've had this issue there where you start to see the erosion of confidence in nonpartisan analysts now. And so the ratio issue, it's a very real one. I have a friend who's a teacher at CVU, and he made the same comment about ratios, about how they've had to add more bodies to fulfill state mandates to then turn around and punish you for having done what you were required to do in the first place. Seems incongruous.
Yeah, I haven't seen any sources of any research basis for that ratio. It seems like they took the amount of, whoever they is, took the amount of money that they wanted to save and then figured out what the ratio of teachers would need, like, did it backwards.
When politicians use big, round numbers, like 400 million, I'll just leave it there.
If I could make just one comment.
All right, sir.
Something that does bother me, I think we have a good education system in this state. But I think it could be somewhat more efficient. We run $18,000 per student per year. There are states that do it for $7,000. And I'm not going to tell you that they do the same thing that we do, but there are obligations that are put upon our school system that are not there in other states. They're taken care of by other agencies.
Right.
And I would urge you to look into that means of addressing things.
That's good.
And that's precisely what I think would be a great bit of information for you guys to work up for us, is to the extent you can quantify those additional things that really aren't what people think of as core education activities, and how that's grown over time. System-wide, for what it's worth, over the last 5 years, the number of dollars spent on psychologists, social workers, and mental health professionals has been $16 million statewide. It's about 55 new FTEs, and that's all more pressure on the math teacher and buying supplies and computers and all the other stuff. So your point is very, very well taken.
Right. In Senate Education, I had asked if we could work up some way of separating out sort of the social services and public health aspects of services delivered at schools, but not necessarily core educational services. And our chart of accounts, I think, doesn't support that kind of accounting yet, but I think it's a direction, not just as an accounting exercise, but so that we'll have more transparency for everybody. Because I think, as Tim was saying, if you start separating out why are the numbers going up, many of those things that to the public at large, it just sounds like education's getting expensive. But I think what's getting more expensive is education plus taking care of our children at school. And I think no one wants us to just push on finances and forget about the kind of important social services that we deliver through schools. But it would be helpful to have it clearer. And as Tim was saying, if you can help us understand that better as we work on a unified chart of accounts, I think we'll all be able to see it better.
One last thing I'll just add is that the projections for next year that the state and the legislature are assuming for education spending growth is something like 2.7%. That's based on contracts that are in place and expected cost of living and different things. So 2.7 is the percentage next year, and I think it's important for boards to file that number away because you're effectively competing against that perceived average spending growth.
But most of the money that is involved in that is healthcare.
A lot of it is.
Yeah, yeah, and if healthcare is growing faster than 2.7%,
Oh.
of course, that means that other things are getting sacrificed at the altar of healthcare. So, for sure.
Well, thank you. Oh,
So I just wanted to add one thing. I actually wanted to address Diana because I served on the ACSD school board for 3 terms, and I was the finance chair this past year and helped navigate our budget through the system. And your comments were exactly what I've been saying over and over again, that all of us school board members have worked so hard to come in and follow the rules and do what we were asked to do and even do more than what we were asked to do. And we did talk to our voters, and our voters did know what they were doing when they passed our budgets. And it's one of the driving reasons why I'm running for Senate after Senator Ayers said she was retiring, is I want to be able to bring the work that we all do at the local level in school boards and the intimate understanding we have of school budgets and the challenges that we face with new issues coming into our school districts to Montpelier, to be able to carry that message that we did exactly what we were asked to do, plus more, plus we serve our kids extremely well, which is really the point beyond all of this conversation. So I just wanted to thank you and let you know that I feel your pain and your glory. So thank you.
well, thank
So
you.
we've taken
Thank you
plenty
very
of
much.
time. Anything else you want us to keep in mind before signing off, heading back to Montpelier?
Anybody have anything else?
You've got our email addresses, so
Yeah.
you can follow up if you have anything specific, and we can chat about the healthcare thing.
Sure.
Yep.
So thank you again for
Great.
adding us into your agenda.
Yeah, thanks
thank
for
you.
reaching out, and thanks for your time tonight.
Good luck.
And good luck, yeah.
Really.
Okay, so we're moving on to presentations to the board. We're going to start with the food service collaborative. Hello.
Can we ask you guys to kind of split away?
Now that the sun kind of shifted. I know.
It wouldn't be so bad if Joanne would give us chairs.
Blinded by the lake. That's not in the budget. Oh, it's not in the budget. Well, with the Wisconsin, he's lost a lot of supporters that were gun advocates. He's not racing on Thunder Road because of it.
Well, we started at 6.
I'm pretty sure that guy's gonna go back and take notes. A whole percent, but that's the easy thing.
Maybe.
Hi, Kathy. That's a hard conversation to follow.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it gives me, a lot of appreciation for the work that you do all the time and the things that you have to think about. I'm going to have you think about one of those extra ways that we care for kids at school every day that, again, is becoming more important. I think there's been a real surge in our need to feed kids well. We feed them breakfast, we feed them lunch, and we feed them an after-school meal. And that wasn't so even 20 years ago or 15 years ago when I started in child nutrition 20 years ago. We never even imagined we'd be serving an after-school meal. And now here we are, and we're serving summer meals and all kinds of things. So we know all too well that schools and you guys are doing an amazing amount of work. So thank you. So I'm going to be as brief as I possibly can. I want to just give you a end of the year report that's kind of gives you a good sense of where we are after the first year. I'm going to keep emphasizing it's been 1 year. And boy, did it go fast.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I can't really even believe I'm standing here talking to you about this because it went fast and we did a lot. We did a lot of really wonderful things in our school nutrition programs. And this was kind of to encapsulate what the year was all about for me and I think for our entire staff. It was about, for one thing, just understanding how kitchens work in this particular district, how school nutrition teams are working in our district, and how the cafeterias are working. So there was a lot of sort of information gathering, watching, figuring out what's going on already. Absolutely spent some time this year introducing new practices. So we didn't just watch and listen. We definitely introduced new practices. We introduced cycle menus, which is a way of kind of shoring up how you purchase food and how you keep your inventory, and sort of regulates things a little bit without hopefully making it boring or uninteresting for kids. And we probably have a little bit of work to do in that regard, and have some ideas about next year and some seasonal cycle menus, but we did introduce those. There was it was a learning curve for people looking at cycle menus and working with them, but our staff did an amazing job, and I feel like by the end of the year we were seeing some real benefits from having gone that direction in terms of really having good inventory practices and even good hourly attendance from our staff and real efficiencies in kitchens based on having cycle menus. We've developed a really good professional community that's really committed to learning and are meeting our own USDA standards for professional development, but even going beyond that, looking at how they can grow within our profession. And that's kind of a big a piece of the work that we're doing. We had a staff member, I think if you read our Tray Talk newsletter, Carmen Yoakum was invited to present at a regional conference, our Tri-State Child Nutrition Conference. And she did an amazing job. She represented Vermont really, really well. And that was one of your people. So we all felt really proud of her and happy that she got to do that. Efficiency is something we spent a lot of time talking about. I'm going to go into that in a bit. Common standards, just lots of work on having a common agenda, things that we all agree on. We spent a lot of time talking about sugar this year, for example, and really trying to decide what can we tolerate in terms of levels of sugar at breakfast. It may sound like a silly conversation, but it's really important and we have to address it. So we're working on it. We came up with between 7 and 8, which is really hard to achieve for breakfast in the morning, but we're working on it. So those are the kinds of standards that we're working on and addressing. And then finally, inventory management, which is a big part of our financial picture, and we've gotten to a place where I think our staff are really doing well with that. They're learning new recipes, new service models, new work expectations, and new program management meaning basically me, kind of coming in and sort of supporting, hopefully being supportive in their work, but also directing things in a way that I think will work better. So everybody's been, I think, very happy, I hope. We'll see. So I talked to you about this in the very beginning when I came at the beginning of the year, and I'm going to go back and just give you a little update. We talked about how in child nutrition we look at four things that help us measure success. And we look at these in our child nutrition programs monthly. They are free and reduced eligibility. Are we reaching as many kids as we possibly can and making sure that we're at the highest level? Our meal participation, are kids eating our meals? Meals per labor hour, are our staff being as efficient in their workday as they possibly can? And these are things we're very transparent about. We talk about with our staff. They understand this, and we're making adjustments, as you'll see, for next year to be better at these things. And finally, expense to revenue ratios. How are we spending our money in relation to what we're bringing in? So first of all, free and reduced meals eligibility. This district, as has Addison Northeast, which by the way will soon be Mount Abe Unified School District. I'm trying to practice that because it's going to be really hard. We have both districts have seen a decline in free and reduced participation. It's slight, but it's a decline nonetheless, and it also has huge implications really for our revenue sources. So we need to watch this really carefully. As you can see from this chart, while we saw some initial dips, we pretty much got all of our programs back to the levels that we ended with last year. So meaning we got applications out to families who maybe didn't actually qualify at the beginning of the year, but by the end of the year, through Martha sending multiple reminders to people, we were able to get most of those levels back to where they were at the end, and hopefully capture everybody that we needed to capture and make sure people were getting the meals that they need. When we look at this, it's a measure of our ability to create access, to get applications in people's hands and help them fill them out and get them back. It's also a measure of how we're using our federal resources. This is really important that we stay on top of this because our highest reimbursement comes from our federal dollars. And it really helps to support families. So we have to make sure these levels are as high as they should be. Not that we want people to be poor, but it's something that we want to make sure we're on top of and not missing anyone. It also is a measure of our ability to support families in a meaningful way. And it's somewhat a measure of socioeconomic status in our communities. So the good news is looks like socioeconomic status might be getting a little bit better. We also see, I think I might have mentioned this to you before, we also look at enrollment in 3 squares as a measure of socioeconomic status in communities, and that has also declined. The number of people that are eligible for those programs has also declined. So we think our decline is on par with what we see there. But it also could mean, unfortunately, that while people may have income levels that are not making them eligible for these programs, they may also have expenses like college and daycare that we don't see, and they're not accounted for when we ask people to give us information about what they can afford. So we don't really know, but we know that income levels might be a little bit better. 50% is sort of a magic number, as you may know, because it makes our schools eligible for other things, including our summer meals program and our after-school meals program. We are in our first year or second year in Addison Northwest of grace period. So once you qualify for those federal funding programs at 50%, because a school is 50%, you have 5 years to continue those programs whether or not the school is at 50%. So our job in the next 5 years is to make sure that if we should be at 50% again, we get there by having those applications available. So that's where we're at. Any questions about that?
I'm just trying to be aware of the
Yeah,
time Elizabeth
okay.
has to leave in
Yeah.
15 minutes.
Okay, great. These are the current percentages, in case you want to know, 46, 41, 31, and 30. Okay.
I think George had a question.
Yes, sorry.
Do we know what the gap is between your chart there showing what percentage of kids and what it could be?
I'm not sure I understand what it could be, the gap. It could be, these are the different schools. Each line is a different school.
So if Addison, for example, ended the year at 46%,
Yeah, Addison's 46%.
okay, do we know what
it
percentage of
was.
kids actually would qualify if they were to actually sign up? In other
We
words,
think
what's
it's
the gap?
46%.
Oh, okay, so 100% signed up.
Yeah, we hope so. We don't know that for sure, but we think so. They started a little bit lower than that, and they're up a little bit in Addison. Addison's actually up from where they started last year, the end of last year. So we don't know that because we have no other data. This is the data that tells us that.
Okay.
Family applications, other than the three, we know from 3 squares, we can look at that too. But, so we think we're doing pretty well. And that's the thing, is we try to do that, yes.
I understand that there's some hesitance to sign up for these programs because people are embarrassed, but
Yep.
I think that it's the perception of what happens to the kids in the school lunch line. There isn't any way that it's apparent when a child is paying or they're receiving the free lunch, is there?
No.
No.
And we have point of sale systems now that actually hide that completely. And our staff don't even know.
Okay.
Our staff won't know on the serving line if someone's getting a free meal. They would have to come and ask a manager if they needed to know. So yeah, unless the student tells them, they won't know. Okay, to move on, our meal participation, this can be really quick. We're doing well. We've increased participation or maintained participation in this is breakfast. I can go into more detail if you want to, but this is the numbers. You can see the bars. We're doing great. And this is lunch. So we're doing better in every single school. We've made a dent in participation. So these are numbers actually that are through April 30th, by the way, because that's the data that I had available for this. So we're seeing increased participation, most significantly breakfast at Virgins High School and at the elementary school, and also lunch at the elementary school and the high school. I've heard great things about the high school. I'm really proud of the work that they're doing. We're seeing really nice increases there. The lunch was increased by 17%, which is pretty good. It's a pretty dramatic increase. So the data tells us we're on the right track. And I guess what I do want you to understand, if you take away nothing else from this, we're watching this data. Like, we're trying to learn from the data, and we look at it every single month. And it's not just me and Martha, it's also our staff. We show it to them and we say, okay, what can we do about this? So 2 important things. We're tracking data monthly, and we still have room to grow. I don't want to we're not sitting on our laurels and saying, oh, done. No, we're gonna get even higher. Measures of productivity are really important in our programs. We want to know how many meals are produced in an hour. And we want our staff to know that we want to know. And we want them to know that we want them to produce a certain number in an hour because we have to. That's how we get efficient. This year was mostly figuring that out and tracking it. And we will be making adjustments in staffing next year based on this information, because we know we can get better staff labor hours in certain schools. And our staff understand that as well. And the way we adjust that is we either reduce staff hours or we add meals. And we're going to do a combination of both, as you'll see next year when we make some decisions about that. Nothing that's, dramatic and nothing that people are upset about, but just really adjusting so that we're more productive. And these are the numbers. I can send this to you so that you can have it and
Have the
maybe
PowerPoint
review
and
it a
stuff.
little more. I know it's really hard to look at, but basically the idea is that other than in Addison School, where it's very, very hard to get good meals per labor hour because you're kind of, it's a small school and you're defined by time and the meals are not available because there's only a certain number of kids. Other than in that school that we can increase a little bit, we're going to make some big jumps in our meals per labor hour, working on the premise that we should do between 10 and 15 meals per hour in scratch cooking kitchens like we have. Those are the types of kitchens that we have, and that's the expectation. It's basically a national standard. Okay, so this is the budget piece. This is the tough stuff. Do we meet expenses with revenue each month and financial management? The good news for our programs is that we are working really closely with Elizabeth, and we're managing our finances. We're on top of our bills in a really good way. We're on top of our billing when we have invoices to send out, but we will do more of that next year. So our revenue is coming in a timely fashion. And we did get our first, basically, a profit loss statement for the month of April, which was really helpful to see. And you may wonder, so why did it take so long? There's just lots and lots of systems that have to get put in place in the business office to make all that timing work. And it's very dependent on timing. And I think we've really gotten to a place where we've figured out the timing and how to get there. So tracking revenue and expenses as a separate entity, we're doing that. We're reviewing expenses monthly against our budget, so we're very aware of where we fall short or not. We're anticipating revenue and expenses, and we're going to be able to do that even better next year, having gone through a full year. That was a challenge for me this year, not having been here last year, to do a good job of anticipating. We will be much better at that next year. Adjusting expenses as needed. We did a little bit of that, but we'll see some dramatic adjustments next year after having gone through the year, especially, as I said, with times that our staff are working and those kinds of things. In addition to shoring up our menus and doing better on expenses with food and supplies, et cetera. Timely payment systems, we've nailed that. And generating a monthly profit and loss statement with the help of Elizabeth and Martha and staff at the business office is going to really help us. So we look at these program expense ratios, and I'll show you program revenue ratios. And honestly, they're not ideal, but this is where they're at. We are showing that we spend a lot of money. Over half our budget is on wages and benefits. And we should see a little more, we should see more than 29% spent on food. That ratio is a little bit off kilter. Not huge, but that's what it is right now. So we have to deal with it, and that's the situation that we're in. We have some, it's one of our issues. How do we pay all these employees and their benefits and still have really good food to serve to our kids? So I won't go through all that because we want to keep moving. I think you saw it. And then on the revenue side, we're seeing that our school contribution is now, I mean, this is also as of April 30th. I think this is as of the financial report that I have on April 30th. The school contribution is at 33%. That basically, to be honest with you, this chart is a little skewed because we don't have everything in from our federal revenue yet, and we certainly didn't have all our sales from students yet. So we got all of the contribution from you guys at the beginning. So it's a little bit skewed, but what we're looking at is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 24%, something like that, as a place where we're going to need support going forward for the next couple of years. So I guess I just want to finish by saying I think we've made a lot of progress this year. Staff development, training, collaboration and support, lots of efficiency. Our menus are under control. We have POS systems in all of our schools. We're tracking our data, as I said. We're generating lots of revenue. We've started to build some catering revenue, which I will tell you over the next few years we'll build. We're doing a really good job of that in Addison Northeast, and I feel like that's something that we can develop here. Catering just sort of in-house, being the resource for you to go to, so our money's coming right back to us. Your money's coming back to us, basically. All these other things. We have some amazing kitchen improvements happening thanks to your bond and thanks to the support of principals and Ken Sullivan. Those kitchens are going to look really great. And so next steps are really about closing the gaps and working hard to just maintain this good progress that we're making and begin to close some of the gaps in finances that we've uncovered, basically. So, we have good nutrition in all our schools, we're efficient and productive, we have trained professionals, we're responsive and flexible, and we have good management of our human and financial resources. It's not always the picture we want to see, but we're managing it, and we know what's happening. And I think that's a big piece of progress. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
You're
great.
welcome.
Thank you for tracking all that data. It's really, this is
You're
great.
welcome. And
Very
I will,
informative.
you can always call me and I can answer your questions.
Would people be interested if I sent you the PowerPoint? Is
Yes,
that
please.
Of interest to you?
Yeah.
I'll make sure I do that.
Post it on the website as
Perfect.
well with
That's
the
great.
minutes.
So I personally want to thank Kathy. I know firsthand from talking to the staff and working with the staff that everyone, from the kids to the food service personnel, to the teachers, to the support staff, everyone has been thrilled with the improvements that we've made, and it really is because of the leadership that Kathy Alexander has brought to us. So I want to thank you again for that, Kathy.
Thank you.
Can I add just real quick that the only reason we have Kathy is because of this woman right here?
Well, no, it's
I mean, it's pretty, I just, yeah, she goes under the wire, but I thought I'd say that as well.
preceded her, I think.
I think she probably did.
So Elizabeth needs to leave soon, correct?
Yes.
4 minutes.
Okay. So I think at this time, if there's any questions about the financial aspects, not only of the food service, but anything in Elizabeth's business report, now would be the time to catch her before she departs. So,
Especially as it relates to the action item that we have.
yes, the couple action items now that we have, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Lori.
So, I wanted to say specifically to Elizabeth to give you a very special recognition from this board member that has been on the boards for a few years and gone through some really difficult times in the business office, that your tackling the student accounts is phenomenal.
Yes.
And I really, really appreciate the fact that you have all the work you've done and the difficulties that you've dealt with, and you still got this cleaned up, so thank you.
It was a team effort, so I had a lot of help.
Yeah, that is a huge success,
It
though.
is a
Thank you.
huge success. I have a couple others if it's okay.
Does that, did I see another hand? George, did you have a question for Elizabeth? No, okay, yep, go ahead.
So, do you,
At some point.
Okay.
do you have any idea how much I assume there'll be some savings now that we don't have to have a line of credit? Do you have any idea how much, was that just a few $1,000s savings? Is it 10, 15?
So we just received the actual statement for the current year's line of credit, and the interest is about $50,000 for a year. So it does save, so without a line of credit coming into the coming fiscal year, that's probably about the amount you could save.
Wow. And that's another bonus from getting this stuff cleaned up, because we've been behind a long time.
Getting all of the accounts consolidated into one and having all the cash available on the district instead of in separate accounts.
And not running deficits year after year.
Yeah, that too.
This is really awesome.
Having surplus.
Superior. So the newsletters, this was the regular newsletter talking about receiving POs. And you said something about that we've been receiving some invoices without purchase orders. And I just wondered, and maybe we can talk about this in the finance committee if you want, but, and maybe I should do that.
Yeah,
Why don't we do that in the finance committee? And then that's a PO thing that, we'll talk about that in the finance committee too. And then Holy Toledo, 6.4 to 17.2% increase in our health insurance?
That's where the health savings is coming from for the legislation.
I know. I'm like,
I know, yep.
and we
George?
are so helpless. And then, is it possible to get the numbers to the senator? Maybe you already wrote this down about what the
Well,
senators are
yeah,
asking.
we'll have to talk about
Okay.
that, yeah. I think
Yeah,
that,
just
see how big of a project that might be. I think it would be ideal.
I was
but
just
yeah.
gonna ask her to make sure it got asked.
Right,
I have
So
a
that's
quick
it.
question.
George?
We transferred a whole batch of money to the food service program, and now you want us to authorize some more.
Yes.
What we did covered the previous year's shortfall, and this is for this year?
Correct.
So we are running this much in arrears still?
This is what we anticipate. You'll see in the motion that it's up to a certain amount. We still have some, what's the word I'm looking for? Adjustments to make, because that's up until the end of April, I believe.
Yep.
So, going forward, we're asking you to give us permission for a certain amount. But I have to tell you that, given where we have been over the past couple of years and the work that Kathy's done, we're getting our arms around this, and we do not, I set a 5-year plan to ameliorate the deficit.
Yep.
Well, I think we're gonna need a 3-year plan to make sure that we're staying within our budget. So I think that this is the best case scenario for us.
And I think Elizabeth estimated 100,000, right? And we
Yes.
said, we
So-
put the motion of up to
Right,
150.
so the data we're using right now that Kathy and I really hashed through is about, is through April 30th. And so, you know, you're filing claims and then you're waiting for your reimbursements to come in, so sometimes not all your revenue is recorded at the same time all your expenses are recorded.
Right.
So that's part of it, is trying to analyze that, you know, and get ahead of it. I think in the last couple, at least the last couple of reports that I sent out, in my business manager report, I mentioned that there was potential, a lack of revenue to cover the expenses in the food service program, but I wasn't willing to put a dollar figure on it, because we just didn't know how short it was going to be. Between me and Kathy, we agree. We're estimating about $100,000, but we also agreed we didn't want to lock ourselves in, being that this is your last board meeting before the summer rolls in, and we're going to end June 30th, and then we don't have a meeting. So we did put the request in for an up to 150. We won't be giving what we don't need in the program. The other thing that we really kind of talked about with Joanne also in a meeting with Kathy, and when we were discussing all this, are those things that Kathy talked about in her presentation about maximizing revenues, reductions in expenses where we don't necessarily need them, maximizing the staff time, and getting those more efficient ways of providing the meals. I think when we built the budget this year for the food service program, we already knew right from the beginning that it was going to be difficult to reap in the revenue that we would need to support the expenses that we already have, as she showed in her pie charts, that the human capital in your program that existed was already here and running when she came in and took the program over. So, you know, having to kind of work with that system for a year and see what can be changed in the new year. The other important piece about this is, as we roll into next year, when we built our budgets for next year, we already increased the budgeted subsidy to get closer to what reality is for this year. So, if that makes any sense.
But we're gonna start next year at 0.
Yep,
Yes.
yep,
That's a tremendous improvement.
Yep.
yes, yes.
I had one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is actually from Joanne's superintendent report, but it's a number, so I figured Elizabeth might know. In Joanne's report, they talked about, you talked about transportation costs being $466,000, which seemed really low to me. So I went back into the budget, and just the line to from is $625K. And that doesn't include special ed,
Right.
lots of other stuff. So the report has 466.
So what I'm taking that number from is the actual contract that we
Which is
have
with
with, which
to
is
and from school
to and
only.
from school
Yeah.
only.
Doesn't include all the extracurricular, it doesn't include special
Okay,
ed.
now the to and from on the budget line item is $625K. I'm talking 18-19.
18, 19, I don't have it with me.
So if this says the current year, so this would be 17, 18.
Yeah, okay, so it
That's what
it is
actually
not,
costs,
it's not
yeah.
466
The
for the current
466
year
is what
either.
actually cost this year, yeah.
That's the actual at this point?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you'll notice there are some X's instead of a number there for the ridership. I was not able to pull that together for today, but I will get that number and send that number out to the board to complete that part of the report.
So maybe you want to follow up on that in committee as well, because
Yeah.
that does seem like
That's
something
a huge difference, so
And we do
I,
have the contracted amount
Yeah.
for next year also, so I could pull the contract and we can see what the actual
Okay.
contracted amount is for next year, because we have a 5-year contract with Betcha.
Right,
Yeah.
just make sure that lines up.
And that
Yeah.
ridership that you're talking about is the utilization of the buses, right?
To and from school only.
Yeah.
To and from school only.
The number of buses and the to and, what's the ridership on each of the average daily ridership on the buses to and from school?
That's really important.
And that's hard to come by.
Yeah.
Well, it is hard to come by because, as you know, kids switch it up, but we also have a very successful after-school program, and
Right.
that after-school program doesn't run 180 or 176 days of the school year, but it runs for most of the school year, so that's going to change that number as well.
Anything else for Elizabeth before she runs out?
The final monthly numbers that I'm gonna have to read off from the month.
She's got,
That's plenty.
we've got them.
Good. Okay. Thank you. So we have another presentation, School Climate and Behavior Data Aligned to the Board's Vision.
So while my team is setting up, I wanted to let the board know that this was a follow-up to a conversation we had about what would be the evidence that I could provide the board to areas of your vision that would display that we are moving towards achieving that vision. And one of those have to do with resiliency and some of the words around social emotional learning. So I'd like to introduce Lynn Rappaport. Lynn is our Health and Wellness Coordinator, Nick DeVita and Dylan Stahl, as well as Brianne Walsh, and these are our 3 school psychologists. I just want to say a couple of words about the work that they've been doing. They are assigned to work in each of our schools, and they're also responsible for things that go above and beyond their responsibilities, like they get involved with PBIS and some of the social emotional learning proficiencies, and they work extremely well together. They actually came from the same college, and they graduated at the same time. So welcome to you, and I'll let you go on with your presentation.
Worked. All right. Present, that works. All right, hi everybody, thank you for having us. So we were asked to present on student behavior, school climate, and some of the social emotional supports that we have here in the district. So we're gonna try to talk as long as humanly possible. So we're going to talk about a couple different things, but we wanted to start with some definitions of stuff that we can kind of revisit as we go. But the first one is SWIS, which stands for School-Wide Information Systems. So SWIS provides web-based data and reporting systems for screening and monitoring student behavior. The system allows our schools to easily collect and analyze behavior data around school climate. It also is aligned with our PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, which is a school-wide, so we tried to summarize it to the best of our ability. But PBIS is a school-wide system that provides clear expectations for behaviors and consistent consequences for inappropriate behaviors across all classrooms and all school settings. By rewarding these positive behaviors and by explicitly teaching our students how to engage in these behaviors, our goal is to foster a positive and safe learning environment for all of our kids. FBAs is something that we'll also talk about later, which is functional behavior assessments. And that's a process that identifies specific target behaviors, the purpose of that behavior, and what factors maintain the behavior that's interfere with the student's educational progress. And last is behavior intervention plans, which is a plan based on the results of the FBAs that we conduct. And at a minimum, it includes a description of the problem behavior and intervention strategies that include positive behavioral supports. So this is just a timeline on the next 2 slides of SWIS and PBIS development over the last few years. So back in 2015, 2016 was our first year of district non-contracted FBAs and behavior intervention plans. So it was the first year that the district was not contracting out to get these plans, spending the money to contract out for each individual case. We were able to keep them in-house and have a lot of control over these plans. In 2016, 2017, we appointed our first district PBIS coordinator. We contracted with State Coach to help train staff at universal Tier 1 levels for PBIS. During the summer BEST Institute that we had, we decided to reintroduce the SWIS suite back into all the schools for the data collection, and we'll talk about that too. We hired our first applied behavioral analysis, so ABA approved behavior interventionist for student support, working one-on-one and helping to collect data and provide behavioral interventions for our kiddos instead of contracting out for them. And then social emotional screening for all students grades 4 through 8 is a pilot study that we began and is still ongoing right now. And then the Summer Best Institute was held at central office that year. Timeline continued.
Can you define best?
Oh, sorry. So the best is, what's our PBIS, or Lynn might know better.
I think it's really stands for behavioral, behavioral.
Educations.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, I know.
Okay, that's all right. It's a
Yeah.
behavioral.
It's positive, it's in line with PBIS, and it's yeah, we try to get
It's
out.
a conference to get together and talk about ideas for our school and how we can work together as a team to really implement strong PBIS framework for each of our
Yep.
schools.
It's 2 years ago, it's expensive to send a very large team, so we've in the past only been able to send a handful of people. So 2 years ago, we pulled the money in-house instead, so we were able to invite over 30 of our staff to really just hone in on all the stuff that we would be learning and talking about at the Best Institute, and we strategically did it a week after the Best Institute, so that then we pulled their experts from that they used, and we invited them to join us, so.
Genius.
Yeah. This past summer, we got almost 50 people there. We had a lot, which was really great from all the schools, so it was really great. Next is just the timeline continued. So for 2017, 2018, we identified building-based PBIS coordinators, so like building leads, to work with the district coordinator and also work with our state trainer. Over the past summer, during that BEST conference, we rewrote the PBIS district handbooks and revamped PBIS within each school. So we kind of changed quite a bit. Now all of our schools in the district are officially recognized by Vermont PBIS as PBIS schools, which is really cool. This past fall, one of our schools was awarded for high level of PBIS implementation, which is awesome. And this year we focused on ongoing Tier 1 trainings to ensure that PBIS was being implemented with fidelity. We didn't want to jump to Tier 2 training just yet. We wanted to make sure we really got Tier 1 correct. We have District Crisis Prevention Institute trainers, so our CPI trainers, LGBTQ in-house district trainers this year, and a creation of a district-wide risk of harm protocol, which addresses students for self-injury or harm to self or others. We have a strict protocol now that we follow. And then just looking ahead to 2018 and 2019, our plan is a district-wide initiative to train all of our elementary staff in responsive classroom, which is something that we're starting next week. Begin district-wide Tier 2 PBIS trainings, and we're gonna use Swiss to do electronic office referrals that are consistent across the district, and they also give teachers and staff immediate access to classroom behavior referrals. So the teachers, instead of filling out papers and then handing them to the principals for tracking behavior concerns or office referrals, they're gonna have it an electronic version of that. That will be really quick, and they'll be able to see how the office responded, and all the data is there. And we're gonna be presenting what some of that data looks like once I stop talking. So then PBIS in our elementary schools, for Addison, Ferrisburg, and Virgins, we changed them all up a bit. So Addison is Soaring Eagles, Ferrisburg Stars, and Virgins is Roars. So I think, yeah, Ferrisburg is safe, truthful, accountable, responsible, super citizen. And then we have safety, respect, responsibility, and growth. And there's a lot of posters in all the buildings. Now we have, for Gens, we have Students of the Week, and we have Stars Students of the Week, Soaring Eagles Students of the Week. And the kids really love it. And then at the high school, where our Commodores, we have the 5 guidelines of presence, integrity, respect, kindness, and self-challenge. And then this is just, so the building-wide celebrations we do, so this is just an example of, we had Global Day of Play and linked it to a PBIS celebration. Just the kids just being rewarded for doing a great job. They're really following those expectations and guidelines and just being awesome. So I think Dylan will take over now, right?
Yep. So as Nick talked about, one of the things that we do is we get the Swiss data here, which is the behavior data from each school. So first up, we got the middle school, high school. So right here, this graph here shows you the average amount of referrals per day, per month at the middle school, high school. So you can see that by the time you start in August, there's about 3. Goes up a little bit as the year goes on, but then it also starts dropping off as we get towards the end of the school year, which is good because to me, that shows us that our students are seeing the expectations, they're becoming used to the expectations, and they're able to carry them out more frequently. We have referrals by location at the middle school and high school, and with a big surprise, the classroom is where a lot of the behaviors occur. So this is year to date as far as the amount of the behaviors, or the referrals. So you can see there's over 300 of them that occurred in the classroom. Next up, we got small amounts in the hallway and in the bus, and then sporadically across the other zones. But this still shows us that the largest amount of behaviors are still occurring in our classroom.
And this shows us where we can provide extra support in schools by looking at some of this data.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have referrals by the problem behavior. So now that we know the behaviors are happening in the classroom, what exactly are these behaviors that are happening? And so one of the things Swiss does is it has a lot of lovely acronyms. So you can see it starts off on the very far side over there, closest to you guys, where there's an M and then disrespect, and that M stands for minor. So it's a behavior that is still, for disrespect, it's still disrespectful, but it's not like to that next level where you would see with like a student cursing you out or something like that. You have disrespect is the largest one there, and then you go down to tech violations, students skipping class, and just being disruptive within the classroom environment here. And so what this data shows us is now that we know what behaviors are happening, we can focus on what can we do to help remedy these specific behaviors as they're occurring.
What's a tech violation?
So tech violation would be like the students here at the middle school and high school have access to a Chromebook to get on the internet if they're looking up something they're not supposed to be on. They're like watching a YouTube video during class, or emailing another student or something like that, an inappropriate email to another student or something like along those guidelines. Yes.
You said moderate? M equals moderate?
Oh yeah, M equals like what's considered a minor violation.
Minor, thank you.
Yes.
So we have a disruption, and then we also have, or we have disrespect, and we have minor disrespect. So
right.
Disrespect is more than minor disrespect?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Got it.
If you add those two together, that puts that.
Yep, that puts that as the biggest issue. And so when we get to the elementary schools, that's actually what I did, is I combined all the elementary school data together, and then I combined the major and the minor behavior infractions together as well. So you can see the specific behavior in general, not just the major or the minor version of it.
So what can you do to address, if that's what the biggest problem we have is, what can you do to change that mindset?
So that's where systems like PBIS as well as responsive classroom come in handy. That will allow us to go in and explicitly teach the proper way to interact with somebody, so you can have a conversation without being disrespectful. The guidance counselors as well as the other professionals in the building here will all be trained in that, and they'll be able to give the demonstration to the students. They'll be able to practice it explicitly within the classrooms each and every morning, so that they'll have those examples of this is what it should look like. How can we get you from what you're doing to be more like this?
One more quick, oh, did you?
Sorry. I just
Go
wondered,
ahead.
is combustion actually lighting something on fire?
So, unfortunately, I think that's what it does stand for.
No.
Go ahead.
No one lit anything on fire. A student was probably found to have a lighter
Right.
in his pocket.
Like something that is capable of doing that. But there's been no fires here, thankfully.
Just to clarify, what we can do with this system is we can click on the behaviors and look at the students, and the person who enters the notes for each of these behaviors will usually say what happened, where they were, and what was the situation for each of those, but, you know, due to confidentiality, we don't have, you know, each reason why or each student, and,
Can I just want to say, skip, that we don't have a class skipping problem at VOHS. Students generally don't skip classes. We do have what we call AWOL during callback. And so students will not report to where they were called back, say Miss Ambrose calls them back, they get AWOL'd, but they might have gone to their English class, they might have stayed in their callback, they might have not gotten the message. So that, it's called skip, but it's, to me, that it's like, classes, you know, kids skipping classes, and that's really not an issue. That is a callback location issue.
And unfortunately, there are some limitations within this system, and part of it is to not necessarily be as descriptive as that when you're having the large graphs. But like Brianne was talking about, when you do submit each referral, there will typically be a blurb about what is actually happening for each specific situation.
Can you just tell us how many years we have of this data? Is this just only since August 2017?
So we have prior years as well. Is that correct? Yes.
we used to use this program, and then there were a few years where we didn't have it, but as soon as we rebooted the system, we were able to look at all the previous data.
At VUHS, there was 1 year where we used Power School, but we've since transferred the information. So we have that. We've been using it longer than I've been here. Thank you.
No problem, yes.
So I'm just wondering, would any of these behaviors require you to call the police, or do you try? Is that a thing?
So
Could I make a suggestion?
Yes,
Can
go
we
ahead.
get through the slides and then just, if you wouldn't mind, we'll answer the questions at the
Sure.
end. Thanks.
that works out. Next up, moving on to our elementary schools. And so like I was talking about before, this right here is the combined data for both Virgins, Ferrisburg, and Addison. And so here you can see that unlike the high school, at the elementary school, behavior seems to be pretty standard across the entire school year here. And, you know, when you're talking about that, you're talking about younger kids as well. The age range is definitely different, but you're also talking about 3 different school climates as well with this one.
Kids are being good for Santa.
Yes, that's also actually one of our shortest months of the year for school. So.
And February and April are our vacation months.
Yes. So type of behavior for the elementary schools, it really broke down to these as being the biggest ones that popped here. Physical aggression isn't necessarily going up and hitting somebody in the face. That is anything that happens where there is physical contact with another student, whether that's incidental or that is on purpose. I can count from anything as to bumping into another student to make them fall down and cry, pushing somebody on the playground to get to the slide first. I can also include the use of objects. And so it's a very broad category, and like I had said previously, that is combining both the major and the minor forms of physical aggression, just for the sake of making it a more concise graph. Moving on, you see that the elementary students also have a little bit of a problem with disrespect. However, it's not their biggest issue. As you can see, the next one is defiance and the I don't want tos that are happening in the elementary schools. And as you can imagine, when you're younger and you want something, you gotta have it. So you can see the defiance definitely being the one that's the highest one here. Behavior by location, again, we see that most of the behavior is occurring within the classroom, but then secondary to the classroom is the playground. Now, the playground is not going to be as monitored as the classroom is, where the school size, class sizes will be a little bit smaller, where there'll be the teacher and whatever supports the teachers have within the classroom looking out there, where the playground is a much wider area for the students to play in, and it's also typically where there's the most student to staff ratio, as well as in the cafeteria. It's also where they have the most freedom to play around, and so you can see that a lot of the physical aggression pieces, like I was talking about with the incidental contact, may occur within that playground area as well. You see the bus is another area of concern for the younger students, And then it's pretty much almost even with the gym, cafeteria, and then the hallway and library rounding out the rest of the graph here. Oops. So I will pass it on to Lynn.
Green light, we're gonna do it quick. So I think most of you have had some YRBS, youth risk behavior data pushed at you at some point or another, so we'll kind of speed through here. Again, just quickly, the YRBS is a national school-based survey. It's conducted every other year. The last one that we had was in February of 2017. It's in conjunction, it's anonymous, voluntary. Schools can opt in or out. Students can opt in or out. It's in correlation with Vermont Department of Health, Agency of Ed, and the CDC. And there's usually 2 surveys, one for middle school, 6th through 8th grade, and one for high school, 9th through 12th. In our district, we only participate in 7th through 12th for those grades. How do we use the data? The data is collected and we use it to monitor and detect changes in risk behaviors over time. We use it to engage students, schools, and our communities. We use it to focus on prevention efforts and to determine whether our policies and programs have the intended effect. The YRBS monitors lots of health risk behaviors, and here's a list of all of them. We're going to focus in the next slides really on the 3 that are highlighted: unintentional injuries and violence, mental health, personal safety, and youth assets. Breaking those down a little bit more, violence and bullying, we'll look closely at bullying, electronic bullying, if students feel safe when they're coming to school, self-harm, feeling sad or hopeless, making a suicide plan, and attempted suicide, and then how are students feeling connected at home, at school, and in their community. So the first chart that we have here, take a minute to kind of look at it. The question is, this is showing percent of students who reported being bullied in the last 30 days when they took the test. The green shows 2013 numbers. The yellow is 2015, and the blue is 2017. The 2017 data just came out, I'm not kidding, a week ago. They only have the Vermont state. They do not have our specific school district yet. So the blue, you will not see numbers yet for our middle school or high school number. And you can kind of see there, again, it's percentages versus numbers. Bullying, just to let you know, is defined as when one or more students tease, threaten, spread rumors about, hit, shove, or hurt another student over and over again. So that's the definition that they're using on the YRBS that they're asking students to answer to.
And the students are given that definition when they answer the questions?
Percentage of students electronically bullied. This question was actually started to be asked in 2013. There's no data before then, but again, electronic bullying described bullying through texting, Instagram, Facebook, or other social media sources. See the trends there. Percent of students who did not go to school because they felt unsafe. The numbers there compared to heterosexual middle school students, LGBTQ middle school students are more than 3 times likely to report skipping school because they felt unsafe. So that's a big jump there. Percent of students who purposely hurt themselves without wanting to die, so self-harm. The numbers there. Female students, the survey data showed that nearly 3 times as many females are reporting self-harm than the males, and as well as 3 times LGBTQ community versus the heterosexual community. Percent of students who felt sad or hopeless for about 2 weeks or longer. Really the question is asking them to did you stop doing activities, your normal activities, because you felt hopeless or sad? So it's, you know, to me, it's a big number to feel that way. This, let's see here, data indicates more, okay, so yeah, sorry, this, the YRBS data indicates students of color were more significantly affected in this reporting than the white non-Hispanic. Students feeling sad or hopeless. LGBTQ students also 4 times as likely to report that. I guess I could just state here too, this year's data, they're really, when they get the results, they've really started to break the results apart a lot more. And this year was the first year that we got really aggregated results for, you know, white, non-Hispanic, other nationalities, the LGBTQ population versus the heterosexual population. So it really broke it down a lot more. Thus, the reason why it takes so long to get the data. Pretty alarming. Students who have reported that they have made a suicide plan at some point in the last 12 months. Numbers are kind of staying the same or spiking, like in the high school from 2013 to 15. So it'll be interesting when we do get the data from our own students to really compare and how we're doing with all the work that has been happening in the last couple years. Hopefully we have a little bit of a different positive look on things. Percent of students who have reported that they have attempted a suicide. Again, numbers are alarming. And they are reporting in the more aggregated details. The younger the students are, the more likely, or the higher the percentages, as well as females are more likely to report than males. And of course, LGBTQ community almost 4 times as likely to report, which is very sad. Percent of students who spoke to their parents or who reported that they spoke to their parents on a weekly basis. Good numbers. I mean, it seems pretty good numbers. And they actually changed this question this year, or in 2017, to the question did state percent of students who spoke with their parents at least weekly about school versus how often are students eating, how often are you eating dinner with your parents? And it gives a range of that. And I think their thoughts are is the more time you can spend with your parents, the more you're gonna share. So we'll see. Modifications have been done in a couple of the questions, and you know, they do track that over time, and we'll be tracking that as well to see if that has an effect. Percent of students who agree that teachers really care about them and give them lots of encouragement. Again, these numbers, you know, are over 50%. Could they be higher? Definitely the results from in Vermont in 2017, something's happening that the kids are feeling more connected, or feeling more connected within their school. So again, it'll be interesting to see what our kids feel like. It's hard to say. Don't know what's happening out there. Percent of students who agree that in your community feel like you matter to people. Again, I think we would hope that this number would be larger than it is. And hopefully with the work that's happening and the, you know, with the community, you know, all of it, hopefully it will matter and this will be a difference here. All right, that's all I got for YRBS.
So we wanted to break down what social-emotional supports are within our schools. So within the elementary schools, we have 1 or 2 school-based clinicians, depending on the school. And school-based clinicians are, they work for the counseling services of Addison County. So they come into our schools. That's why they're called school-based clinicians. So there's 1 or 2 in our elementary schools. There's 1 school counselor per school, either full or part-time. There's 1 school psychologist per elementary school. Guidance classes are provided by school counselors to all students, and 1 nurse, of course, either full or part-time in our elementary schools. So we kind of broke it down just to clarify. The yellow is all the students who are not on a caseload of a school psychologist or school-based clinician. Our school counselors are available to see any of our students. So we, when we had asked for their caseloads, they said, we see everyone. So they really do kind of have that relationship, whether they're in their guidance classes with the students, or they see them during lunch, or whenever they need to be spoken with, have a conversation with adult. School psychologists see 6% of our elementary school students, and school-based clinicians see 11.6, and that's all 3 of our elementary schools. At the high school, we have 3 school-based clinicians, 3 school counselors, 1 for the middle school and 2 for the high school, 3 school psychologists, that's the 3 of us, and we each have an elementary school, so there's not 6 school psychologists, just so to clarify. We have a substance abuse prevention counselor who's also from the counseling services of Addison County. We have 1 school nurse, and we have the Resource Response Center, or RRC. We also have a lot of programs that come into our building to help, like the nurse works with a lot of different programs where they come in and teach our students about consent, or they teach them about just different areas where they need development or growth. So there's a lot of really great supports happening in this building. We again broke down the caseloads for our high school counseling loads. The school psychologists see 3% of the students here. There are a lot of students who work with our school-based clinicians at the high school. And again, all 3 of our school counselors are able to see their students at any time, which is wonderful. Just for check-ins, if the student's having a tough day, they can go in and see their school counselor. Do you have any questions about the breakdown of caseloads at either elementary or high school level? So to kind of go off of what Lynn was talking about with the YRBS data, we have no idea who any of those students are. And so some of the data in the past years was kind of shocking to us to see that there were a lot of students who had reported that they were doing self-harm, or they had a plan for suicide. We don't know who any of those students are. So we had introduced a social-emotional screener that asked general questions for all of our students, just to see where they're internalizing, so kind of their thoughts about themselves and their externalizing behaviors. Maybe there's aggression, maybe there's defiance in class. Looking at that information, we had the students fill out that information, and we also had the teachers fill out that information. So we had 2 perspectives. And that was a pilot study that had started 2 years ago. In 2018, there was a social-emotional team that kind of formed, where it was the 4 of us and Kara Griswold, to review the data that happened in our pilot study. A lot of our students were showing concern, and so that was telling us that at a foundational level, we needed to add some things to our guidance classes, and just for our PBIS systems, where are we having these holes for all of our students to support them. And so moving forward, we had decided to go with a more comprehensive screening tool that was not as that was not targeting all of our students. We wanted to really hone in on the people who really needed additional supports that are not already on our caseloads, who have some difficulties that we really want to have some counseling goals for, and provide some more intensive supports. So I know I rushed through that last part, but for the sake of time. But do you have any questions about any of our information? Yeah.
I'm curious to know how responsive classroom and RRC kind of mesh, what that transition is from the elementary school to the middle high school.
We're not, responsive classroom is gonna only be for K through 6.
Right.
Responsive classroom only offers training for middle school if we were to, and that could be a goal depending on, I think, what what
I'm
happens.
just
but for
curious
now.
to know if it's an easy transition or if it meshes.
I mean, I
well.
think from what's already happening in morning meeting and the support here through RRC, I think that I think it will only support the transition coming here.
Christina, did you have a question from earlier?
Oh, just back to that behavior question, yeah. Do you remember what it was?
I don't.
It was about police.
I was just wondering if you,
police
yeah.
question. Okay, yes. So, I do not have the exact amount of numbers, if any, that police were required to be called for.
Christina, I mean, any policy violation that requires informing the police of substance abuse violations thing is recorded in Swiss as well, that way.
Okay.
Drugs, alcohol, weapons would be the three big ones that we would notify the police. In the summer, each behavior incident gets quite an extensive write-up in Swiss, so the details of the incident are recorded in there. Was that your question, or?
No, I was just wondering if, how severe the behavior, did it ever warrant that you had to call the police? How many times does that happen in a year here? Compared to other schools, maybe, you can read it in the paper.
That's a different report, and I've been asked to give behavior reports. I'm happy to do that another time, but that's something,
It just occurred to me when we were
different than
It's not
that.
going to be labeled as
Yeah.
police required, but if you look at just the amount for alcohol and weapons were the two that Stephanie had brought up, and they're very, very low. I think it's like 1 or 2 per,
Yep.
So it's a very low amount.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. This is really informative, good information to have, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It is. This is a pretty intense meeting.
Right.
Sorry. That's all right. Thank you. Whew, okay, so we are moving on now to action items. So, I'm looking for a motion for action item A.
So moved.
No, you need to state the You need to state what the,
I move that we approve the 2018 Series 2 Vermont Municipal Bond Bank sale. Second.
does anyone have any questions or conversation about that?
Yeah, like, why is it, we don't have a bond?
So-
But we have the one bond.
So
Yeah,
the
okay.
information
We have a bond that's already.
is in our
right, got it.
packet here, Primer, Piper, Eggleston.
Yeah, I read through it, but
The letter was pretty insistent to all municipalities, do this, you've got to do this fast.
Right.
The bond sale is coming up.
Yeah.
So we're good to go, okay.
We actually have 2.
Yeah,
Okay.
one existing and one coming.
Well, we broke the bond that was voted on into 2 parts.
Oh,
Okay,
thank you.
but for right now, we're just voting on
Yes.
this one, bond bank sale, okay. So all in favor of approving
Sign it as a.
this 2018 Series 2 Vermont Municipal Bond Bank sale, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
We're
opposed?
passing around the vote to sign.
Okay. Papers are coming around. We have to sign in 2 places?
They're tabbed.
Okay. 3 places.
And there's only a few lines, so push your
Oh,
signatures together.
Okay. But we do need a majority of.
You need a
Yes.
majority.
Okay, all right. Action item B.
I
Madam
move we
Chair.
approve the minutes of May 14, 2018.
Second. Does that include the special meeting?
That's right, that was on the 14th, yes, to include the special meeting minutes.
Okay. Any amendments or questions about the minutes from the May 14th board meeting or special meeting?
There's no letters underneath. Wherever you want.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes from May 14th board meeting and special meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just see.
Action item C. Mark, that's you, C.
Oh. Sorry, I was.
Tell me where to sign.
So approve bill and director's orders in the amounts of student activity fund. I did go through the checks and the payroll and student activities with a random search and didn't find any problems. So student activities, 32,700. $722.72. Check authorization in the amount of $517,407.75. And payroll in the amount of $874,937.58.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
Yeah. The reports I got had different, at least one different total. I didn't catch I was pulling it up. Could you just read the student account?
Which one?
About the
Student
student account
account.
one, 32,000.
$32,722.72.
So the payroll is short of a couple $100,000 difference than what the first report I was sent, or we were sent. So that's a little strange. It was 800,000, you said, right?
Unless I was-
$874,937.58.
Well, I don't know what to do
Committee
with that.
received a report.
The committee received a report. There was a payroll report that had, let me just pull it up. Paycheck register, at the bottom of the paycheck register is $110,848.09. And we don't have Elizabeth here to tell us why. It's concerning because we're supposed to be doing a random test of the same dollars. So.
What's the date of your report, Lori?
This came on the 2nd.
Of June.
This is from Carol. And it came on the 1st of June.
Oh, that's what this one's dated as well.
Yeah, so I guess that's a question for Carol and
Looking over
Elizabeth.
your shoulder, I see 4 attachments. Does that make a difference? Because we only have 3 numbers.
This one, I didn't look at this one. This one might be, let's see what this one says. Well, that one does say 800,000. I can't really, oh, here, I can do it. Press. 874?
Yep.
Huh, okay. So that's part of the explanation. I got 2, thank you for pointing it out, but I got 2 earnings reports and I thought they were the same, but they're not.
Okay, good.
So I will talk to Elizabeth about that one.
Okay, so, but you're in line with the 3 numbers that we
Yep.
have motion
Yep,
for? Okay,
thank you.
good. Any other questions about those? Okay, all in favor of approving those bills and director's orders in those amounts, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Action item D.
I would move that we authorize the superintendent to offer a contract to the VUHS assistant principal, the Addison Central School interim principal, the VUHS physical education teacher, and the elementary general educator.
Second.
Questions or conversation about any of these appointments?
May I?
Yes.
I'd like to introduce the board to Kathleen Kilborn, who is the candidate for the interim position at Addison Central School. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Great. So all in favor of offering?
I have a question
sorry.
about the assistant principal position. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know, because the assistant principal will have some supervision and evaluation duties, if there'll be some kind of a mentor or coach for him.
Yes, there will be a mentor. We've already assigned someone that's actually been working with the administrative team over the past couple of years. This individual has a lot of expertise in the Danielson framework, and the framework is the system that our evaluation systems are built from. So he's already done some observations with her this year, and it's gone very well, and she will continue in that capacity.
Great, thanks.
Good. Okay, all in favor of authorizing the superintendent to offer those 4 contracts, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. E. For a motion.
Move to authorize fund transfer from general fund to cover shortfall in food service of up to $150,000.
Second.
So I think we got the explanation on this. Any other questions or conversation on that? Again, it's up to 150,000, estimated currently at 100,000. So, all in favor of authorizing that transfer, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And F.
I move to authorize the board chair to sign the Addison land deed.
Second.
Okay, any conversation around this? All right. All in favor of authorizing the board chair to sign Addison land deed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And we have G here. George, I'm gonna have you read it, because Elizabeth sent me the language here.
Okay. Will the board authorize to approve the Addison Northwest School District resolution for the Ferrisburg Capital Improvement Refunding Note Borrowing Renewal in the amount of $17,858 plus interest to be paid in full by the close of fiscal year 19?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So this is like we had a few months ago for the capital improvement fund that was VUES, Capital Improvement Fund. We did this refunding / refinancing of that. This is the one that was the Ferrisburg Capital Improvement Fund. So we paid this year, and every year they refund it. They reissue the note.
We are not receiving any.
We are not receiving any money. So,
Who issues the note?
I believe it's People's Bank.
Oh, right.
Does that make you feel better?
It's
Yeah, a
something,
little bit.
it's something that just keeps going on and on and on, and we gotta pay it. And
So-
that's what this does. This says that at the end of this fiscal year,
Right.
we're gonna pay the interest and the principal and get it out of
Right.
the way.
So we've paid, I think, about this amount, this 17,000 this fiscal year. Next fiscal year, this one will be paid off.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know why it
Yeah,
works
right.
this way, but it's the way it works.
It's one of
Yeah.
these things, it's, they just keep rolling over,
Yeah.
and we're trying to eliminate them.
So, okay, so all in favor of approving the refunding of this Ferrisburg Capital Improvement Note, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it needs to be signed.
Yep, it's 2 places, and the clerk needs to sign on the last page.
Okay, excellent. That concludes our action items for this evening. Board and committee reports. So we have superintendent's report. Any questions for Joanne on her superintendent's report? Incidental report. Or do you have anything to add?
I have nothing to add this evening.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, and I wish John was here because my admiration for what the policy committee has been doing is, it's just amazing. And I'm really super appreciative of the report backs. Again, being somebody that's been on the board many years, it's really great to hear the report backs. I also wanted to know if ACS is closing for the summer.
We are with the closing. There will be staff that needs to operate out of ACS because of the construction projects, both at the elementary school and the high school. And so we have relocated our technology staff because they need to be repurposing and what's the word I'm looking for? Imaging, thank you. The new computers and that will be delivered to Addison. The school secretary will not be back on duty until August. And Kathleen will be on duty in August as well at some point.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad it's not closing. I think you might have heard Addison did close one year, and it wasn't very pleasant when they reopened. Okay, great. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything
I just
else
have
for?
one clarification, so we, originally at the budget, we had RIF 3 teachers. We have now brought 2 back, and the only reason we didn't bring the 3rd back is because she has a new job.
Correct.
So it's not that we weren't.
Correct.
And now we actually have an open position.
We have a first grade open position.
So we really didn't RIF any positions
Right.
in the end of the game, which is what we said we were gonna try our best to do, even though the
Well,
budget said we had to.
Right.
We're gonna do our best to try and figure out ways to make it work, and it did.
Sometimes it's timing,
Yep.
right?
We did reduce positions, right? We did still reduce the positions. We didn't end up having to RIF any people.
I just mean,
Or we were
one of
able
the things
to
we were
recall
telling the community
people.
during that whole
We s-
process is, yes, this is what's happening. We will do our best, people-wise, to do what we can. And just acknowledging that we did what we could.
We were able to recall the people that we had sent notices to, yes. Okay. So nothing else for Joanne?
Come on, this is my last night. Nothing for me? Really?
Not at
Making it
this
easy
time.
for you.
We can't give you any directions to go and do something, right?
You can try.
You can try.
Wouldn't you like that, Joanne? Okay, principals reports. Anything for the principals? Thank you all for your reports all year.
Yeah,
I do read them, and I do appreciate receiving the information.
I read them too.
Well, come on, that immunization rate.
I know, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I know.
Round of applause for
You're right.
98%.
That's pretty amazing.
Point two.
Applauding the immunization rate. Okay.
I had-
Did you have a question?
I do.
Yes, go ahead.
This is for Stephanie. Can you tell us why the testing was happening so late in the year? It just seemed like, oh my gosh, that on top of the end of the year stuff?
You know, there's no good time to do it. and
Yeah.
It's tests on this year's learning. So it makes sense to push it back. It's like I don't know, I want to say 13-week window from whatever your end of school date is back. So the state here in Vermont, it defines a window. And we, last year, because we had so much testing going on, we said the middle school tested during the high school final time, because it creates sort of an academic expectation school-wide. This year, because it was 7th, 8th, and 9th, we wanted to get rid of as many other distractions in the building. So we combined it with one day was the walkathon, and then the 10th grade went to the Castleton visit. So it was a way to get, but then the walkathon got moved back, and so we moved the testing, and it's never good, but later seems a little bit better. And, you know, we could have tested like the first or second week in March, but there's a whole quarter of academic learning going on, so.
Well, I wanted to echo, and maybe the board wants to echo, your thanks to the teachers and the staff and everybody for doing it, because there's so much going on at the end of the year, and I just can imagine that just makes it all that much more difficult to get through the year.
If the
So it's really
walkathon
great.
happened in the fall, then that would have been one less thing to do, but.
So, thank you. And then you mentioned something about the light stimming. Is that related to the performance contract?
Yeah.
Ah, so cool.
If I walk out of my office and then come back in, it's like, hi, Steph. They come.
That is so
awesome.
Good.
I just wanted to say thank you to Travis, and good luck in your new job, and we will miss you. And I really loved board meetings at ACS because you always had little student things or things teachers were doing that we could get up and move around. I really appreciated that a lot, so thanks.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, they had a lot of fun doing all that too, so,
Good.
thank you.
Anything else for any of the principals?
Sorry.
Student, okay, board, we're up to me, okay. I do have two things to report. The first one is in place of the executive session. Sheila and I signed her contract today, and I think I forwarded to everybody the tentative approval from the AOE. Yes, I did forward that, okay. So all that's left is the background check. So we have the approval, the contract is signed, so it is public, and background check. So what we settled on was a 3-year contract with a starting salary of $125,000, and that the professional development money would be used to provide the mentor in year 1. She has already contacted the VSA and met with some potential mentors. So she's on the ball there, and I think she may be actually about to settle on one even, but I guess that's not finalized yet, so I won't say that on camera. So that is the news on that front, so yay us. That was good.
That was amazing. How long did that take, that process?
Well, it ended today, so.
So today from.
It's not quite over yet. We're still waiting for that final.
It's phenomenal how
confirmation.
fast that went.
Yes.
And well.
Yep. And the other thing that I wanted to update you all on is the August retreat. So Sheila and I talked a little bit about that as well. She's going to work on trying to get out, well, she's working on finding someone to facilitate so that we can come out of there with some goals / strategic plan, as we had talked about at our last retreat. And she's reaching out to a couple potential facilitators that she has experience with, and that also the no, actually not that Val Gardner.
Sheila's reaching out, or Joanna's?
Sheila.
Sheila.
Yes. Did I say Joanne? Sorry.
I-
It's embedded in my brain, so
that's
I'm
why I was
sorry if I
checking.
did. I meant Sheila. So once she finds a facilitator, she'll send out a doodle poll for dates, but we're looking obviously at August. So that's what I have for my report. Thank you. And Hannaford Career Center.
I do not have a report because the school board meeting is on Wednesday, so
Okay.
I haven't had anything since the last time.
All right, well,
Next time.
thank you for going.
Did you have a graduation? Do a graduation? Do they do a graduation?
There was a
for me?
graduation, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Did you guys go?
No,
Oh,
I
it's fun.
wasn't.
Did you go?
I went, yes.
Did you? How was it?
It was good. Well, I had a daughter who was graduating.
Good thing you went. Congratulations.
Yeah? What program did she graduate with out of?
The art one.
Oh, yeah?
She was taking an art and design class.
Nice.
Industrial arts. I
Yeah?
think it's called, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's
Cool.
awesome.
Good.
Congrats. Congrats, Dad.
Thank you.
VSBA?
So, this coming Wednesday, we have an all-day retreat, or most of the day retreat. We're gonna do the strategic planning. We're gonna talk about increasing board development opportunities. We're working on a model equity policy. They're considering doing remote participation for regional meetings to increase attendance. And they're talking about how the VSBA is going to approach statewide teachers' health insurance contracts set up. That is going to be a big one. And I mean, the more I hear this, it sounds like we're headed down this path, that it is eventually going to be that the state negotiates the teachers' health insurance and not us, which is interesting. I'll let you know more about that as it goes. I wondered, we've had, all the school boards have been requested if there's any resolutions that we want to have the VSBA adopt, and I wondered if we wanted to talk about the call for action to prevent gun violence that we adopted last time, that maybe we should ask the VSBA to do that. We only have next meeting, though, to make that. We have to vote on it before.
Right, I actually thought this was the last meeting, that's why I brought it up at the
July
last.
9 is a.
So we don't have another meeting before July 9th.
Right. So
Okay.
what I would do is, if people are,
Right.
right, I mean, I would say, hey, we're gonna vote on it on Monday, it's coming. We're not gonna make the deadline by close of business, but we'll have it by that night, is what I was
We
saying.
don't have a meeting in July, though. This board
Oh,
doesn't meet
it's
in
on
July. Really?
It's on the calendar. That's why I figured. I didn't think we did either, and then it was on the calendar, and I'm like, well.
It should not be on the calendar. It's
Shouldn't
not
be.
at the bottom of our agenda.
Maybe it was
If
my
maybe.
doing. That could be, it could be, because it's possible. All right,
It's on
so,
the calendar,
so
that
we
is
don't
a
get
mistake,
it. That's
so.
fine, and then we'll do it another
I
time.
think
or
that's
maybe
a really
somebody
good
else will.
idea.
What's
I
that?
I like that idea about gun
I do
violence.
too, but it is what it is. Maybe somebody else will do it. Maybe some other school boards will do it. And that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So, community engagement.
So we met on May 17th, and as a result of Sue's press release, Donnell Barong, who's connected with the Virgins Partnership, came and met with us, and we're just kind of
The board's press release, sorry.
the board's press release, right? And we had a really great conversation with her. Virgins, in terms of housing, has got like really high occupancy. Virgins real estate's really doing
Nothing
pretty
for sale
well.
right now.
What?
There's nothing for sale right now.
Nothing for sale right now. So we kind of just talked a little bit about how we could maybe have a little bit more collaboration. One thing she said, which I thought was really interesting, is that there is a lack of daycare in this community. And
there is.
I'm thinking maybe we have some in the schools. It's just something can schools start to think about childcare centers? That might be a way to bring in rent money or something and to also solve a need in the community. We are having two fall community activities that we're using the $600 for that we got from Nellie Mae. They will serve food and have childcare, and we will have the food service cater it. And that is going to be October 11th and November 1st, I think. So the idea is that we will have table conversations, and then the results we get from those table conversations, we will develop deeper questions for the November. So people will come to hopefully two events. They're not the same events. It's kind of like spiraling down. We did not get our VSBA grant because we did not have, the 3 grants that they handed out all went to school districts with 50% or higher free and reduced lunch. And some people in the committee were hoping that maybe there could be a little bit more involvement from the superintendent and principals in our committee, if they could be a little bit more active. Oh, and we did our May, we had an activity at the Memorial Day Parade. We had 3 6th grade students and 2 high school students who went around and asked questions of people who came to the parade. What were 4 things they thought of when they thought of our community, our greater 5-town community, and then they wrote them down on a whiteboard and the kids took pictures of them. And Beth, do you have those pictures?
I do have, I have actually, yes.
Okay, so we're hoping maybe to post those on the Facebook page, but also to continue that activity at sports games and things that go on in the fall, and just as a way to build relationships with and to empower our students and give them a voice. That's it.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Okay, facilities, are you doing?
I guess I am.
Okay.
We had a meeting Friday. George provided us with a graph on his computer that showed that as the work is progressing, that the baseline energy usage is going down, which proves that we actually are getting some benefit back from our projects.
Yay, that's exciting.
We had originally voted in that committee to separate our bond money because there was a lot of question about whether the solar was going to be approved or not. So we kept $550,000 of the bond money aside. We didn't request a bond for it. And then there was a discussion held with Green Mountain Power. Green Mountain Power said that we could put in a solar system, however, we could not send anything to the grid. So the amount of solar that we put up had to be sized to what we were going to use. George had some questions about the amount that the contractor was telling us we needed to put up there, and did his own analysis and came, I believe he said, within 2 to 3%. And so the decision was made to take the second bond for 400 of the 550,000 to put up an 80 kilowatt solar array, and it's going to be split between the C wing and the middle school roofs, and those are going to be repaired in the area where the array is going to set. So we shouldn't have problems in the foreseeable future underneath the array. So that's, and part of the money from the bond is paying for those repairs underneath, so that we will, it isn't a separate project, but it's all part of getting the solar up there. And I don't know, we had we had a issue about another section of roof. Do we have to?
We're not
pursue
prepared to
that?
talk about that yet tonight, but I think we will in our follow-up facilities committee.
Okay, so we have another facilities meeting on the 22nd, I believe it is.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like things are chucking along, trucking
We-
along okay.
We are,
right.
there's stuff is happening.
Good.
And that was all with the students still here. Now that
Right.
the students are almost out the door, things are really gonna gear up.
And stuff.
Yep. Well,
Right.
that's okay, if staff's here.
All right, great, good. It's nice to see some of that being implemented there, put in place.
I have a
All right.
question.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
How do you know that our usage, do you work for Green Mountain Power, or do you have access, how do you know that?
We have AMI data. This is,
AMI?
it's advanced metering infrastructure. In
Oh.
other words, most of the meters now in the state of Vermont have the capability, in other words, they're digital meters that to be able to be read automatically on a 15-minute increment. And so each one of these little blue spikes is a day, essentially a daily cycle, and then the sort of the gaps in between the 5 days is the weekend usage. And so, I mean, you can see that the baseline was sort of trucking along at 60 kilowatts, and then in this area right here, the smaller spikes, that was the February break, and there's a downward trend of about 20 kilowatts. That, and that's when they installed a lot of the LED lighting. And then it grew again a little bit over April break, but then it went down again. So, I mean, so there's some, there's some real life evidence, in other words, that, it seems like we've pulled at least 20 kilowatts base load out of the building at this point. And I'm expecting more when they do more of these
Right,
lights, for
right.
example.
Great.
And there's, the lights with the controls automatically save us not only the actual light itself, but the control, but then there's a programming function that has to be done, and when that's done, we're gonna save even more.
So, so the lights they have occupancy sensors. They can be manually dimmed. You can tune them so that if you don't need them at 100% initially, let's say you only, in a small room where we often meet for a policy meeting, there are, I think, 2 fixtures. Maybe those 2 fixtures at 100% is just flat out too bright. You can tune them so that they're, say, 85% max brightness initially. They'll never exceed that. So that's, 15% savings right off the top. And then in spaces where there's daylighting, whenever there's a lot of sun coming through a window, maybe you don't need the lights to be on at full strength as well, so they'll automatically dim in response to daylight.
Great.
But there does need to be some tuning and,
And the
commissioning that
tuning
needs to
and
happen.
stuff will be Ken's, is that?
No, I think
the one
that's the installers that are gonna do that, isn't it?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but
But it's a state-of-the-art system. We're right on the leading edge
yes.
of technology.
Pretty cool.
Cool, thank you. Finance Committee.
We didn't meet. Mark
Okay.
did the bills, and he didn't, sounds like
No
it
problems,
didn't have any
went
problems.
quite smoothly.
And, I think I might know what the difference is between those 2 reports. It may be the payroll tax payments, which is on one report but may not be on the other. That could very well be what the difference is. So, I think we didn't approve the correct number. But we can fix that next month, maybe?
You can.
Check with Elizabeth, figure it out.
I'll talk
It's
to
water
her.
under the bridge anyway, so you can actually adjust it at your next meeting,
Right,
whenever
right.
that is.
Right.
But I'll get clarification from Elizabeth and send that response out to the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you have a job.
So Policy Committee, I think.
Yes, one more thing, Diana.
Oh my gosh. I have to keep you busy until the last second, Joanne. Policy Committee, is someone speaking? I know John there was a report in our packet from John.
Am I the only one?
No,
You two on the end there.
Last meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
I mean, basically, just to echo what John said, I think we've met, or almost met, all of our goals for the year in terms of creating policies,
Yay.
reviewing policies, reviewing procedures. There's still some things in the works,
right,
but we're, I think, making progress.
that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, well done. And thank you, Joanne, for answering all their questions, getting them all the information. All right, and negotiations. Do you want to talk?
We approached both the teachers and the support staff, and we have a reply from the support staff that they're interested in starting negotiations as soon as the new school year starts.
Yep. Great. Okay, I guess that's the end of our reports, so that brings us to discussion items. And we have just one discussion item. And we all wanted to just thank you for all of the wonderful
She was sitting over there
contributions.
wondering, what's this discussion gonna be about, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't tell her. So this is just to recognize you for all of your, I mean, I think we can all agree that our district is in a much better place now than it was.
Oh, my
For you.
goodness,
For you.
yes. Thank you very much.
Well, I just wanted to say, it really, truly has been a pleasure to work with all of you, the administrators, the teachers. This really was a little bit of a dream to be able to come back to a community that I started out my leadership career in, and to be able to rekindle my relationship with those that I knew then, and also to introduce myself to the new staff. This district really has come a long way. I know that you feel proud about that. I feel proud for that, and I truly believe that Sheila has the skills to take this district to the next level. So I wish you all luck. I hope that you continue to connect with me. I am going to develop a blog so that I can share with you my stories. I will come back at Christmas and also the summer, and would love to come back and visit and find out all the wonderful things that you're doing. So
You can come to a meeting.
maybe not a meeting, but thank you very much.
You can always watch
Thank
us on
you.
TV.
That's true, Christina. Maybe I'll stream it from Kuwait.
Are you gonna open it?
I will.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
Oh,
love to.
well, it went out.
No,
Came
it
to your email.
Yeah, right, and stick it in here and keep it in here, along with a million other things that go.
My mother-in-law used to drive me crazy at Christmas because she would repurpose the paper. Just like to just take it out.
Like a little kid.
Wow. Hey, what do you here? Help me?
Got a hunting knife?
Yeah.
What'd you do? Thank you, Diana, for wrapping the.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
There's two in there,
There's another one. Oh my God.
Right there.
This one?
No, you have it in your hand.
I do. Thank you. This will fit nicely in Kuwait where there's no greenery. It's all desert.
It will remind you of
Remind me
Vermont.
of the Green Mountain State. Thank you.
That's right.
These are made by prisoners in,
Kuwait?
Nicaragua.
Oh, dear.
But the money from the sale goes to the prisoners' families to
Wow.
support their families while they are serving their time. And it was, started by, that's the,
That's beautiful. What a great idea.
Great.
I thought when you're traveling, you can always use bags.
Oh my gosh, yes, you are absolutely right. Well, thank you very much. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Good luck, yeah.
All right, I think that concludes the public portion of our meeting, so we need a motion to enter into executive. Who's gonna make the motion? We need a motion, people.
I don't know the verbiage.
There you go. It's right there. It's on your agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Thank
to
you.
Go into executive session for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter in conjunction with the statute 1 VSA 313A1 F3.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, public, for coming.